I appreciate it. Thank you. You know what? We're sort of back on schedule, right?
We are, so this is where we are.
Yeah, so on the schedule, you see a thing there about me talking about the filibuster. I just think, you know, Kelly's here, so he can correct me if I mess up at all. I think it's really important for us to understand how, you know, everybody right now is, you know, don't change the filibuster, don't change the filibuster, but as you know, 2 or 3 years ago, it was change the filibuster, because the president wanted to change the filibuster to be able to get things through. I opposed him then, and I support our efforts now to not change the filibuster. And some of you, there was an article, I think today or yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, by someone saying, a Republican, a conservative, saying we need to abolish the filibuster. And laid out that, you know, well, the Democrats, you know, they'll pass things and we get control and we never repeal anything because of the filibuster. Well, yeah, that's true, but there's a bigger story here, and I'd like to share with you, because this is going to be a topic of conversation, and it's one that we need to be informed about. And so let me just sort of walk through real quickly. Our founders did an amazing job in structuring this country. I mean, you know, the three things that happened during the Revolutionary War period is, number one, we won freedom. We won a war, and we were able to create to win our freedom from Great Britain. Number two, we established freedom. That's actually harder. In human history, it's harder to establish freedom than it is to win freedom. Lots of people win wars, but the question is, what do you do with it? And our founders did a heck of a job with it. They put forth, as you heard, Congressman Duncan with his Constitution, read the Declaration. Our rights come from God. Never before in the history of man was there a country that was founded on God-given rights. Rights don't come from the government, they come from God, and that the government's role, established in the Constitution, was to protect those rights. And so they put this Constitution in place. The hardest thing, so has that been done before? Never prior to that. Has there been God-given rights? But there have been republics before and since. But they didn't last particularly a long time. Some lasted longer than others, some didn't last very long at all. But certainly none have lasted as vibrantly as ours. And so that speaks to the greatness of the founding documents and the principles that were in there. Because our founders understood that winning freedom is hard, establishing freedom is harder. The hardest yet is maintaining it over time. It's just time. Eventually, you get again, read the Old Testament. You know, God comes down, separates the Red Sea, and 20 years later they're thinking, "Where's God?" I don't know. They start building idols, right? We just move on. We don't remember what made us great. We don't remember. Every generation sort of has to relearn. That's why what's going on today with critical race theory, what's going on in our schools, is so important, because they're not learning what made us great. We're not carrying forward those things that are so important to keep a country free, safe, and prosperous. So our founders put in place the thing that is the most important, and I know this is really hard for some people to understand, is that our country is a very stable country. And the founders put in place, they said, look, we're going to establish this really great philosophical idea and constitutional republic, and we're going to make it really hard to change it, because we think this is really the right way to go. Now, you can change it, but we're going to make it hard to change it. And for example, if you want to amend the Constitution, you have to get 3/4 of the states to approve a constitutional amendment. That's not an easy thing to do, because they didn't want the Constitution to be changed in a willy-nilly fashion. They were concerned, if you look throughout the history of time, there were two concerns they were fighting against. Number one, the tyranny of the majority. Okay, let me repeat that. The tyranny of the majority. We have a bunch of people running around, particularly progressives, who all they want to talk about is, well, let the people's will be done. No! We don't want the people's will to be done immediately, because you have the passions of the majority that remember, our Constitution was set up to protect who? Minority rights, not the majority rights. We forget that sometimes. We say, we're a democracy. No, we're not. We're a republic. Okay? You want pure democracy, go to revolutionary France. There's your pure democracy. You have the mob. You have tyranny. You have guillotines. You don't want the will of the majority of the moment. right? So they set up something that said, look, we prize stability. We prize change slowly over time when there is broad consensus to change, right? So they set up this Constitution, which was hard to amend. So what was the left's first assault? Their first assault was an activist judiciary. To do what? To amend the Constitution without going through the process. Judges would just make up new constitutional amendments, which they did with Roe versus Wade. And they've done with other things throughout time. And so that's why this pushback, I mean, for 30 or 40 years, the left had the program, and they would put all these activist judges on, and Republicans were sheep. I mean, they voted unanimously for Breyer. They voted almost unanimously for Ginsburg. I mean, nobody fought anybody. They were knocking down Bork, almost getting rid of Thomas. I mean, all of these things were battles, and we just went along until, Kelly was there. We fought back once we got control of the Senate when Trent Lott and I were there and running the show. And we started fighting for our judges. And everything has sort of changed. Republicans got with the program. And now we fight for our judges. And God bless Donald Trump and appointing some, I think 3 pretty good judges. 2 I feel real good about. 1 I'm not quite sure yet. But the bottom line is we at least have the potential to do what? Get stable judges who keep to the Constitution. I am no more for an activist conservative judge than I am an activist liberal judge. I don't want a judge saying there's no right, abortions are illegal according to the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say that, okay? Do I want abortions to be illegal? Yes, but I don't want some judge telling me that. I want the people to decide that, because that's how it's supposed to work, okay? It's harder. One of the things I really worry about conservatives is we are starting to act like them and try to take shortcuts to get things done. Which brings me to the second thing, which is if you look at the powers given in the Constitution, the judiciary is given the least amount of power, and really was just sort of to uphold the Constitution, and the left went after them first. The second place the left went to, and this was under Obama in particular, was the executive branch. Limited powers, but they thought they'd blow through those powers, just like the judiciary did with activist judges, through regulation and, more importantly, executive orders. Barack Obama blew the lid off executive orders, using executive orders and regulations to basically circumvent the Constitution and circumvent the Congress. Okay? Now, just again, Donald Trump was worse than Obama. Now you can say he did the right thing. Doesn't matter. I don't care if he's doing the right thing. If he's doing it the wrong way, doing the wrong thing for the right reason still wrong. Okay? You shouldn't be. Presidents are not kings. They cannot rule by fiat. You may like that they do that. You may like what he's doing, but when you condone it, then what happens? Biden's worse than Trump. And you go, well, we'll get the next round, and we'll be worse than them. Oh, and then we'll get that. Pretty soon you have a king. Because you just think, well, they did it, we're going to do it worse. No. That's not conservative. That's not standing for the principles that our country was founded upon. We aren't about winning. We're about doing the right thing. Okay? And just because we think this policy is right, it's a republic. It's hard to pass good policy, and it should be. I know you think, well, wait a minute. No. Yes, it should be. Right? Because you need to form consensus. Right? The third thing, and that is, so they put in place constraints on the power of the judiciary and constraints on the power of the president. Finally, they gave you the United States Senate. Now, most of you don't understand how the Senate functioned and what the purpose of the Senate is. But when I describe to you how the Senate was originally constructed, you will understand what the founders had in mind for the United States Senate. Remember, they gave almost all of the power to the federal government they gave to the Congress in Article 1. So they wanted They were worried about a centralized, powerful government. So they gave a lot of power to the democratic body, if you will, the Congress. But they wanted to make sure that it didn't get carried away and act like some revolutionary republic might act, right? Majority will republic. So they set up a house for a majority election. I mean, you got elected by the people every 2 years, and you could pass a bill by one vote, 50 plus 1%. Go ahead, public, vote all those crazy bills, and from the time that the republic started, the House would pass probably 100 times more bills than the Senate did. But that's where the public could get their energy out and elect people and get their issues brought up to the day. How about the Senate? Okay, do you know when the Senate was created? Who elected senators at the time of the Senate? State legislators. You hear of the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Lincoln and Douglas were debating at state legislative election debates. They were arguing for the election of local state election state House members and senators, who would then elect them as a senator. They weren't going out and debating to the public. They were debating, trying to get legislators to vote for them. Okay? In Illinois. When did that change? That changed with the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. Prior to the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, senators were elected by the legislature. Now, there are a few states that changed it right before, in the early 1900s. But up until that time, almost all senators were elected by the legislature. Why? Because they wanted the power to stay at the state level. And therefore, if the legislators elected the senators, senators would come and they would be responsible to whom? The state government. So, what happened? Up until the 17th Amendment, up until the early 20th century, Washington was a backwater town with very little power. Why? Because senators wouldn't give them the power. The second thing was, they had the election of senators. The second thing was filibustering. Now, everyone thinks of the filibuster, now you have to get 60 votes, and that's a ridiculous number. Do you realize up until the 17th Amendment was passed, and the popular election of senators, in order to pass a bill in the United States Senate, every senator had to agree to vote. Not 60%, every one. If one senator didn't want to vote, there wasn't a vote. You want to talk about making it hard to pass a bill? You had basically the states having an arm of the government, if you will, the Senate, and every senator had to agree before you voted. How did anything get passed? Consensus. So there may have been bills that passed that not everybody voted for, but they realized, you know what, time had come, public was overwhelmingly for it, and there was some horse trading, which is, okay, I'll let you vote on this if you let me vote on my bill. In other words, people had to work together in order to get things done, but it was really hard. Right? They did that to constrain the power of Washington. 17th Amendment passes during the Progressive era. In conjunction with that, the 16th Amendment passed. Anybody know what that is?
Income tax.
The income tax. Anybody know how the income tax passed?
Or did it?
The Progressive Party was the party, just like for the 17th Amendment. Progressives were pushing an income tax. They could never get it passed. Right? The income tax had been tried many, many times. They could never pass it. But they found a key voting group. And this is why I say this to you. As conservatives, careful what you get in league with the left. Because you may say, well, I want to win because this is really important. Careful when you partner with the left on one of their priorities. Why? How did the 16th Amendment pass? Anybody know? The 16th Amendment passed because of the Temperance movement. You say, well, what do you mean? Yes, Christian conservatives, Baptists, other teetotaling folks, they joined with the progressives. Why? Anybody know why? Because they could never pass prohibition because it was the excise tax on alcohol was the main source of funding for the federal government. And so if they passed prohibition, the federal government would have no way of collecting revenue. They'd go broke. So the temperance movement joined in with the progressives to pass an income tax so they could then get rid of alcohol and the tax.
The 18th Amendment.
In the 18th Amendment. So there are, I hear things, I won't say where, but I hear things about conservatives joining with the left on regulating big tech. Careful what power you give them.
Right.
Because they are always one step ahead of us on this stuff. Right? You may worry about your access to media, but careful who you are in bed with. Because the baby ain't going to look like what you think it's going to look like. Okay? So the filibuster basically stopped a lot of good legislation from passing that took longer than it should have. I remember when I came to the Congress, came to the Senate, and I was thoroughly frustrated that we had a cloture vote on something that should have passed. We even got some Democrats, but we came up short. And I was just bemoaning. I was walking back from the vote, and I happened to be walking next to a senator who had been there 30 years. His name was Bob Packwood. So I'm walking back with Bob Packwood, who's a senator from Oregon. I'm just complaining. I'm a new member. And he said, boy, you sound like me when I first came here. And I said, how's it? He said, I complained about the filibuster. And he said, I remember walking back with, he mentioned, I can't remember the senator's name, from Delaware. He'd been there 40 years. And he said to me, you sound just like me when I came here. And he said, and you know what he told me? I said, no, Bob, what did he tell me? He said, I thought the filibuster, filibuster was a bad thing. He said, but you know what I found out? If it's a good idea, it'll pass in 5 or 10 years. And I thought, that's crazy, that's horrible. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's good. It's good. One of the great things about America is we're not doing this every 4 years.
Yeah.
We're not some crazy republic that every time some new prime minister or something comes in, all the policies change and we go with a whole new country and then we go to and by the way, the swings are going to get wilder given the division in this country. So stability is a good thing. The filibuster is a good thing. What happened in 1915 with the 17th Amendment is now senators were popularly elected. So they had to go home and tell you what they did. They had to get your vote. So they had to start doing stuff. That's when cloture came into effect. They said, well, we can't say, well, he couldn't get a bill passed because some guy from Oklahoma said, no, we're not going to do that. Oklahoma just became a state. We're not going to let them, control what the country does. So they put in this thing called cloture, which said, instead of one person being able to stop it, you needed 2/3 of the Senate to stop it, to stop the debate and go to a vote. That was changed in 1975 to 60% instead of 67%, and that's where we are today. Now, here's why I'll tell you that one other example of why cloture. I got 2 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to do a call that I couldn't get out of. There have been 3 times since the cloture rule was put in effect, 3 times that there has been a supermajority, a cloture-proof majority in the United States Senate. Once in the 1930s, once in the 1960s, and once in 2009. Those are the 3 times in over 100 years where one party has had a supermajority, a cloture-proof majority in the Senate. And what happened? 1930s, the New Deal. Huge expansion of government. Second time, 1960s, the Great Society. Huge expansion of government. Third time, Obamacare. Huge expansion of government. So you want to give them the right to on a majority vote and think we're not going to have a huge expansion of government? Do you think if they had a majority vote now, the Green New Deal and $6 trillion of spending, you say, oh, we'll repeal it. Good luck. Show me one time we could get even a majority to repeal an entitlement that was once privileged. You can't do it. It's hard. It's a lot easier to pass giveaways than it is to take them away.
Really?
And everybody thinks, oh, well, we'll just take them away. No, we won't. No, we won't. So please, if any of you have any thoughts about the idea that a filibuster removal, it was a good deal. And I know the previous president was for it and still is. It's a bad idea. It is a really bad. It is basically the end of the republic.
Wow.
It's the only thing standing in the way. And so I just encourage you all to understand the gravity of this moment and to do what I think Byron Donald said. Call Joe Manchin and say thank you. Seriously.
Yep.
Call Kirsten Sinema and say thank you. I know Joe well, I don't know Kirsten at all, but she has given as good as a recitation on why the filibuster needs to stay. She gets it, and she has the courage to say the right thing, and so God bless her. I mean, just thank you for standing up for our republic. And we need to be better at this. Okay, we need to tell our friends, and we have friends in the movement who are not with us on this, and you need to, now you know the facts, start preaching the gospel. Okay? I think we're going to take a little
Wait,
break.
coffee break. They go upstairs.
Coffee break, we go upstairs and get some. Okay, thank you all.
Good job, Red.